we're seeing the evolution of AI where every job can be broken down to a collection of skills. We don't know how AI is going to evolve. But we know that jobs are going to be skills. If you want to somewhat future-proof how you're doing work, you should be having everybody at your company take every piece of work they're doing and ask themselves the question, how do I make this into a skill? How do I skillify this?
Today, we're talking about how founders are using AI to accelerate their GTM motions, how they're actually applying it, where it's creating leverage, where it's changing existing workflows, and which use cases go beyond just basic content generation. I'm Scott Strand, the growth lead at Knock. Very quickly, Knock is an AI customer engagement platform similar to Customer.io or HubSpot. Basically, we help growth, product, and engineering teams come together in one platform to build and manage all of their messaging and use agents to make it really easy to manage from Claude, Slack, or in the dashboard. As a result, we spend a lot of time thinking about how AI is changing the way companies operate and go to market. So joining me today is Austin Hay, operating partner at Khosla Ventures. Austin works closely with founders and GTM teams every day and has really great front row view into how early stage companies are applying AI across their GTM motions. Previously, he's helped build the GTM systems at Ramp, Notion, Replit, and more. And he also has a newsletter called the Growth Stack Mafia, where he regularly writes about the new GTM systems he's building with AI. So Austin, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've had like a pretty storied background. I started my career in marketing technology, but it really wasn't called marketing tech back in the day. I was just working for an attribution company at the intersection of marketing, product, and engineering. And that kind of is what my tech is now. And ever since I've been at this kind of cross section between sales, go-to-market, marketing. And I think the world has kind of changed around us. It's become a lot more technical. Systems evolved from 2018 being a nice to have to being a must have, and now with the rise of AI, we're just seeing more and more how people are thinking about how to build and buy, what tools to use, and that's why I write the Growth Stack Mafia, and that's why I'm excited to talk to everybody here today.
And do you feel like with AI, like your job has like do you feel busier today? Like, do you feel like things have really accelerated in a certain way than your past with like building GTM systems?
I'd say like the evolution that I've seen is back in, call it 2018, 2019, there was maybe a well-defined way of doing marketing and sales that used a certain number of tools. And there was almost like a playbook that you could run. And it was pretty hard to set up. But once you got it going, it became somewhat self-manageable. But the only way to really get it working was to use humans. A team would need a leader, a MarTech leader, a couple of BAs, a Rev architecture, a architecture, MarOps. There was just no way around the fact that like somebody had to go into these tools and systems and set up playbooks, set up workflows in order to help the actual operators, the sales folks, the marketing folks do their jobs or achieve whatever goal they have. So I think the big difference is now those kind of junior ICs actually can be AI agents. Any tool that has an API or an MCP connector can be managed and self-governed by an agent. And so I think in some ways, it means you can move a lot faster. In other ways, it means you're a lot busier because you can do so much more. And actually, for what it's worth, like there was a really great podcast with Mark Andreessen where he talked about this. I mean, I can't remember exactly what minute. It's maybe like 30 or 40 minutes in. And he talks about the fact that for folks who are naturally intellectually curious and call it like high functioning, meaning you like to learn and you like to apply yourself and you're interested in lots of things, AI is this kind of dual-edged sword. On one hand, it's making things a lot easier. You can learn more, you can do more, you can read more, you can consume more. And because of that, though, you might find yourself in this position where you're working more than you ever had in your entire life because of the excitement of it and because of your capacity now to do things that previously were unattainable because of time. A lot of MarOps folks, like probably yourself included, who maybe are not full engineers, but like your way around a code base, you can read docs, you know how to write some simple JavaScript. And so the problem was always like, it's not that I don't know how these things work, it's that I'm not a full-time engineer and I can't be a full-time engineer. Well, now you can. And that certainly is the way that I feel is, and many of the founders that I talk to and the companies I talk to, is that it's this tension between being able to move really fast and do lots of things. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means for companies, but that's definitely what I'm seeing right now.
Yep, I'm seeing that as well. That's great. And recently, I saw on your social media you had posted about like moving into this new job at Close Ventures, and you've been talking to just lots and lots of founders, operators about their like GTM systems and their GTM motion in general. What has surprised you the most about how they're actually using AI in GTM today?
Mm. Well, I'd say that, a lot of founders live on two extremes. On one extreme, I think there are founders who really understand AI, maybe because they are building an AI business. And so I guess you call them AI pilled, right? Like they're doing lots of stuff with AI and they're achieving a lot of results. I would argue that a lot of those founders, though, are in single player mode. So they're using their machine and they're doing a lot of things, but it's just a team of one. And then I think like there are a lot of founders who are on multiplayer teams where they have not figured this out yet. They have not figured out how to create a skill and share that with the entire team. They haven't figured out yet what actually should I be doing with a team of two and what can I be doing. I think there's this like big misconception right now that AI just means you can do like all of marketing and all of sales with like one person. And that is just really not real. It's not grounded in anything except like LinkedIn hype. And so I think there are like those two extremes, like people who are single player and are operating really fast, and there's people who are not. And there's very few folks that I found that have figured out how to crack multiplayer mode for sales and marketing teams. And I think like we're all learning, and I can share some suggestions here and things that I've learned, but I don't think like there's a golden playbook for that yet.
Right, right. So in talking to them, like what are the biggest areas of AI where founders are underestimating it? What tactics or systems have you seen early stage companies most often miss that AI can like really reliably handle well?
Um, Maybe obvious to some people, but not obvious to everybody. Like all the stuff that's boring is the stuff you should solve first with AI, not the stuff that's hard. So I think a lot of people want to like build this, autonomous, awesome growth machine that like does all these things and all these tools. And I often tell founders start with the easy stuff. Start with, skills to help your team do their expenses. Start with skills to help team spread out and use agents. Start with skills to help your team manage HubSpot. Anything that like is boring and administrative and what I call discrete, meaning like it's like a process driven thing. It's not somewhat probabilistic. Those are things where you're going to get a lot of value and time back because AI is very, very good at doing things. Things AI is not good at, which I think we're finding, is writing really, really good content. Because if AI were good at writing really good content, we wouldn't see so much slop on LinkedIn right now. And now you could say, sure, hey, people are being lazy and they're not using correctly. And certainly you can create skills and tone guides and lots of ways to make writing better. But I'd argue the process of writing is both for you and for the reader. The part for you is for learning, part for the reader is understanding. And so, I just see so many people trying to build like autonomous content creation machines. And I wish they would spend their time instead just writing from the heart, which what I do with most of mine. I only use AI to help copy edit and like SEO edit after I've written an article. And that's a much better use of time. So that's kind of like the first thing I think folks are underestimating. And then the second is every job at a company can be broken down into skills. And everybody knows what a skill is. It's like a markdown file that describes a job to be done. And I think like right now we're seeing the evolution of AI where every job can be broken down to a collection of skills. We don't know how AI is going to evolve, but we know that jobs are going to be skills. It's going to be a collection of skills. So if you want to somewhat future proof how you're doing work, you should be having everybody at your company take every piece of work they're doing and ask themselves the question, how do I make this into a skill? How do I skillify this? This isn't my idea. I mean, Gary Tan invented this idea of skillifying. Maybe he stole it from somebody else, but he has like a well-known framework for skillify, which kind of pushes a skill into a repo. And they're basically building skills for everybody at the company to do anything you want. And you can imagine that creates the basis for autonomous work. If, and a marketing operations person uploads lists to HubSpot, edits profiles, does CRUD operations on workflows, create campaigns. All of those are just jobs that can be skillified into like a bunch of HubSpot skills. It's not saying that the person is not going to be needed, but as you think about one person maybe managing lots of tools and systems and processes, the only way they get there is by having skills for literally everything they're doing. And we've already established like there can't be an endless amount of context for a job to be done. So you actually need to like break out the jobs you're doing into tiny skills. And I think the best way to do that is just like naturally, like as you solve a problem, make it a skill, as opposed to, hey, let me go have AI kind of rote generate a bunch of random skills for me, which is what a lot of people do online. And maybe you've experienced this yourself, is like you're the solo marketer, you're a founder marketer, and you're working on a team of 8 to 20, and you're doing all this stuff. And now your founder or your executive team wants more. And you're like, man, you're doing like 7 channels. How do I add more? Because you still have to run the Claude commands in Cowork or in Claude Code. And that's where autonomy becomes like really, really important. And so one of the things that I talk to a lot of companies about is like you build all these skills and you take everything and you skillify it. And then you start to look at an engineering practice and you say, what are the things that are my marketers doing that we can actually take their skills and promote them to some type of cloud hosted agent that can do those things for them all the time. There are great solutions out there. Like I have a friend, Mike Molinet, who's building a tool out there. One of our portfolio companies, RunLayer, actually has built a platform for this where you can like take a skill and deploy it as an agent. And then some people are just doing it in Notion. Like we started with Notion. It's this idea that you share all your skills in one place. Notion is nice, MCP that everybody can connect to. There was like this really viral post from a product manager at DoorDash maybe back in March where, and I'm forgetting her name, so pardon me. She talked about how she set up a GitHub repo where people were kind of like building a harness for the entire product and engineering team. And that's really great. And I think the marketing team started to use it, but it requires the marketing team to know how to use GitHub. And I've actually talked to some friends at Ramp, friends at other companies, and like the whole idea of GitHub as like as a harness just totally falls down when you remember that like most people don't know how GitHub works. And so we have these like seemingly complex ideas like a skill and memory files and tools and MCPs. And people are starting to understand those things, but they're not necessarily going to be able to make the jump to starting to be able to use GitHub on their own. Now, again, if you're like looking to get ahead in your career, I say you should, but not everybody will. And I don't think that's the right expectation on any team, even if you're a founder growing their early startup.
That reminds me, like our CEO here at Knox, Sam Seeley, he had a post recently. It's like one of the biggest unlocks like marketers can learn right now to like advance them in their career is just to learn Git, because it's not difficult to learn like once you sit down and really like hear it from someone. Like that was actually me when I started at Knock here. I didn't really know Git, and I sat down with one of our developer engineers, and they just like ran through it quick, and now it's great because it's such a big unlock for marketers.
Totally agree. And I mean, look, I think the marketers who pick up more technical skills are going to become more and more powerful, but there's going to be a lot of people who can't or won't or don't have the time, or for whatever reason, it's just not possible. I'm in this position where I think about designing organizations for teams that don't have technical resources and for teams that do. Certainly, if you're starting thinking about how to kind of AI pill yourself, you would be like, let's teach everybody to be engineers. But that's an investment, and like there's not a lot of supply out there for marketers who know how to code. Um, so, you have a choice. You either teach your team and kind of bring them along for adventure, or you try to design systems that work with the resources that you have.
You had talked a little bit about the marketing ops team at Anthropic and how they run their MarOps workflows. What are some of the coolest things that they're doing over there as, the creators of one of the most used AIs?
So they published an article, by the way. I thought it was cool that they basically did exactly what we just talked about. They broke down jobs into different skills, and they started to think about work as like a collection of those skills. A lot of the skills were not surprising, by the way. I mean, one of the examples pointed out was basically the two things that they talked about were reporting and campaigns. And there's this. I mean, this is directly what we talked about before, right? So reporting, super boring. You're going into a tool. You're clicking a bunch of filters and you're automating a report. I do not even mess around with UIs anymore for any type of third-party reporting tool. Reports can all be generated programmatically and then shared. It does kind of bring up this question of data fidelity of like, what is AI could construct a slightly different kind of SQL query depending on the tool, or a slightly different filter depending on the report. And the second one is campaigns. And actually, maybe 3 months ago when I was working with a company called A2B in San Francisco, we started to like try to automate end to end the entire campaign build process. And one of the things that I learned that I think is pretty applicable here is that if you have existing campaign flow. So say like you're using HubSpot, you have existing email templates, you have a design library in Figma, you have landing pages, you have lit, you have workflows. AI is really, really good at taking things that already exist and making them better, right? We found because we had existing workflows, we had existing lists, landing page, and all I wanted to do was say, I want to build a version of this, change the elements in a certain way, and replicate it. And so we built a HubSpot series of skills. You can call it an agent. An agent is literally just a session that's using those skills. So we built a bunch of HubSpot skills, and we had an agent that would run on those HubSpot skills to create a campaign end to end. And the problem that we're trying to solve is like, hey, it used to take X number of days to create a campaign. How do we go from linear ticket to the campaign being like created and in the linear ticket as fast as possible? And to me, I think like they're kind of highlighting that dream. That's the whole point of the article is they're saying, hey, look, anything that you're doing kind of manually, you can skillify. And what I would kind of maybe take one step further is say, once you've skillified it, now you can automate it. And this is progression that you take, very similar to all marketing engineering and these systems is like, do it once yourself, keep doing it. And then once you've proven that it works, then promote it to something autonomous. But the idea that you can, for example, have a series of HubSpot skills that create an entire campaign, and then once those skills are created, you could actually go into linear and you could host an agent that listens to linear tickets and based on a certain tag, performs those skills autonomously based on the context in the ticket. To me, that's the dream. And so I think about like all the boring bullshit that MarOps folks do, updating lists, changing field types, debugging systems issues, changing workflows, deleting workflows, editing campaigns, creating landing pages, updating the website. All of these things could be done through linear. Like you could have a linear ticket created and the AI agent automatically kicks off and performs everything. But the only way you get there is if you've built the skills for that agent to use to do the job.
Yep. Yep. We have a Slack agent. We're also working on a linear agent at Knock. And essentially, like someone can go into the Slack channel, type that they need, like their, newsletter campaign created. And we have a skill connected, like where you can it will go create the newsletter, target the newsletter, subscriber audience, build the newsletter using all of the same partial snippets. And it actually goes and references the changelog on our website, and it pulls that content information, summarizes it nicely. And really the only step that I have is to go review it and then make tweaks to the wording if I don't like the summary, but it's based on the word phrasing that I've already changed when we launched the changelog. So it's usually very accurate and good. And now that we have a schedules feature as well, I can go and I have this scheduled every month. Go create this campaign, so I have a few days to be able to edit it and then schedule it. But it's really cool to be able to have all that context because it literally just creates the newsletter exactly like we always do it with the same sort of formatting and content. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're touching on a lot of points that we've already, dabbled with. This idea of what's hype versus reality, that's not hype, but it's a pretty complex piece of engineering machinery you've built inside Slack. And likewise, the other kind of the problem that you're hinting at then is well, it's great. You can build all these autonomous machines. Then how do you figure out how many people you need in your organization? How do you figure out what is your human bandwidth? And what it really comes down to is attention and time, right? I've met a lot of founding marketers who are just like you, and they have these automations running, they have skills. And so what work kind of distills to is how much attention do you actually have to devote to any artifact or product of these automations? And if you're in meetings all day, if you're jumping between different channels, if you're examining reports, what you quickly find is that one person is not enough. And so one of the biggest kind of myths that I like to dispel to founders is a one person marketing team will still have limits. It's just maybe the limits will be much higher, but eventually they'll hit a human RAM capacity where they don't have any more attention to give to the dozen plates that they're spinning at the same time. And so you should think about how do we isolate roles so that people can do more and be more focused and increase the quality of the output using AI.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that a lot with another automation I have set up. I use Cursor to manage our website in GitHub, and we recently created an automation that like every week it goes reviews the site for any sort of like improvements, things that are out of date with like recently published change logs. And so it'll say like, oh, this change log was recently published. Now you can mention it on this page. For example, we launched a preference center change log, and it says change the preferences page to mention that you're like a preference center now that people can build. And that's super helpful to catch little things like that, but it also provides a bunch of changes that I have to like go and review. And I've been working on the skill to like make the suggestions better and better. But it's still like, you know, a chunk of them, 30% are like, no, I don't want to change that headline that was like crafted specifically to fit like nicely in the visual format, things like that. And but I find myself like getting behind because I'm like busy doing other things. I'm busy launching those change logs. I don't have time to review like here's 20 different changes to the website that might be good. So it is really interesting to kind of like hit those limits and like also decide where to spend my time. Like I could just spend time reviewing those 20 changes, or I could go, you know, think of like our next growth tactic or be writing our next blog from scratch, like you mentioned. Yep.
One of the things that I like to talk about, which I find deeply ironic. So there's this wonderful paper. I mean, the paper that launched all of AI is called Attention is All You Need. And that's the truth for humans right now. Attention, human attention is literally what you need to be successful. So we're living through some crazy times.
All right. I'd love to dive into some specific areas of GTM that you see early stage companies trying to use AI for, and just kind of get your takes on what's actually useful, what's kind of still hypey in this area. So, like the first would be founder led sales. So, for founders or maybe like a founding salesperson, what does using AI look like for them, and how do you use AI to like handle more of like the research, the prep, and like the admin work around sales?
I think every founder should have a skill on Codex or Claude that runs every hour or at least once a day that helps draft follow-up replies to all their meetings. Because it's like it's the easiest thing you can possibly do to give yourself time back. And I think like people are searching for way more complex solutions. They're like, I'm going to use an AI CRM for this, or I'll like build some really cool system. It's like, no, go build. Here's what you do. Give it all of the emails you've ever written. So here's the hey, Claude, go look at all my emails for the last 2 years, fan out, use a bunch of Opus or Sonnet subagents to summarize how I write emails and to figure out my style based on who I'm talking to. Generalize by customer, by partner, by VC, by friend. Figure out the language I use, the words I use, and come up with like 10 to 20 examples in this file that we're building of how I like to talk. Cool. Enrich this with a skill that I like to call humanized writing. There's a bunch of these skills out there. Everybody's figuring out how to like make AI sound less dumb. Apply that layer. Third, every single hour, I want you to look at my call recordings from whatever tool I use, whether it's Fireflies, whether it's Revo, whether it's Granola, and I want you to summarize what the action items from the call were and what I should write back to them. And I want you to draft the email and put it in my inbox. And like do that for 2 or 3 days. And by the end of 2 or 3 days, that skill will be writing amazing draft emails for you as a founder. And you now will just show up at the end of your day and you'll edit emails and then you'll be out of there. Now, again, everybody's like, oh, I want the emails to send for you. Guess what? Like AI is not good enough to send emails for you automatically. And founders are way too insane in my mind to ever let AI like send an email to a customer because it's all is one bad interaction to ruin the customer. And you're on the other side of a receiving equation. Like if I get an email that feels written by AI from a founder, like, am I really going to take them seriously? So I just think like simplify, make a skill, promote it to a routine, and let that thing run. And a question for you, and I'm sure you like maybe you're thinking about this or you've thought about it. It's like automations for the other boring part of sales because everybody knows about it. It's like, hey, after the call, I got to update the record. I got to provide notes. I got to change the pipeline. I got to, reforecast. I need to draft the email. All of that stuff can be handled autonomously. There's this question, where should it be handled and whether we should independently sellers to do it themselves or whether there should be a central system for managing it. And I don't think there's an answer right now, to be honest. It's like, because you could go into an AI CRM, for example, like Revo or like Adio, and they have agents in there that an individual could set up for themselves to manage it. You could also build an AI agent in those tools on the workspace level to manage it for all sellers. You could build it in another system using those APIs to do it. Then you could also just build like a Claude, skill that's running as a routine. So there's all these places that AI can be activated right now, and I don't think that it really matters so much about where these things live because I think we're all still learning. But certainly, as an organization grows in size and you start to get to this point where there's like dozens of sellers doing this stuff, you would want to think about a centralized system that manages the process for everybody. That way, it can get better, and you don't have to have like different sessions running and consuming tokens in lots of different spots. For a founder-led kind of small organization, it's better just to like let people do it wherever they want.
Yep. All right, next one. We kind of covered customer research, so let's move on to reporting. I love what you said before, and like report is, I think, one of the better use cases for AI, just because it is such a measured thing, and you can really get what you're looking for quickly without having to know SQL or anything. What should founders expect from AI-powered reporting that they can't get just from dashboards alone?
Well, I mean, so first, I think like one of the really cool things about AI is it's now enabled anybody to write SQL. So there used to be this power imbalance at organizations where like if you knew how to write SQL, you could get insights, especially in a more technical organization, in a way that that others couldn't. And so there's this power imbalance. You have to kind of rely on a data team, or you need to have like learn code in order to like get insights. Now AI says, no, I can write SQL for you, describe in words what you're trying to do. I'll peruse the tables, I'll build the SQL, I'll give you the results. Cool. So that means like everything is faster and easier. The problem though is that everything is faster and easier, but not everybody has the level of sophistication and knowledge to know what they're querying for, whether the thing they're asking is correct, and whether the report being given makes sense. So now we have the second order problem, which is AI is creating lots of SQL and creating lots of reports, but still requires us as humans to actually look at those things and say, are they right or wrong? Do they pass the sniff test? And this just judgment, right? It requires an analytical mindset. It requires somebody to look at data and say, like, does this feel correct? Is it off? What reason and why? And what's interesting is like, I think like, humans also make mistakes with data. So there's this other argument that can be made that, now AI might make mistakes with data, and what that all doesn't really matter because it's all a rounding error and like the life cycle of a company. What matters is getting quickly, trying something and learning. And so you imagine like the new state of the world is not very different than the old. Even if you put in that problem of, hey, AI is creating reports and we don't have any way to validate them. So yeah, in my mind, I think that the biggest thing is speed. There's this other question though of like, what is the right way to consume data? Previously, a lot of the ways go-to-market teams kind of operate is you have a dashboard, whether it's in Looker or HubSpot or something you self-created, and you kind of sit down every week and you kind of look at it. Finding more and more that teams are creating their own kind of miniature dashboards for problems that they use. And again, it becomes a proliferation problem. You have a visual that you created in Claude. Another person has it in Looker. There's an amplitude chart somewhere. All these are apples and oranges and bananas. And so kind of simple framework that I think a lot of companies should consider is as the company moves kind of further upstream in their complexity and maturity, you should think about directional reporting and business reporting. Business always should be done in one way by everybody and everybody's AI. That's like connect to prod DB. We pull data using SQL and like a pre-provisioned set of SQL queries that data has agreed to or engineers agreed to. And we all report off the same set of tables. Because when the founder or the CEO has to go back to the board, they need to know the numbers are accurate. So you can't have a bunch of different charts. But if you're an organization that wants to move fast, maybe writing SQL query and getting data to sign off on something is like not the best argument for speed. So then what do you say, hey, look, anybody can use all the other tools that have data in them to make decisions quickly, but we shouldn't be in the business of comparing those tools to one another because there's always going to be divergence. Like there's a well-known fact of MarOps and MarTech, I'm sure you know, is like every tool will diverge at least 5 to 10%. Like there are time zone problems, there's data drops, the API connection has something wrong with it. It could be a bug on the vendor side, a bug you've implemented. Filter. There's like a million reasons why data does not always align very closely between different tools. So that's why I'll say, like, you know, AI helps you make directional decisions really quickly, but we shouldn't get into of comparing tools together and like going down deep rabbit holes trying to debug data differences between the two, which frankly, a lot of organizations spin their wheels on this an endless amount of time.
Yep, 100%. All right, this seems like a good spot to maybe answer some registrant questions. One question was, where will things break as founders really start using autonomous GTM campaigns? So, as a founder, how do you refrain from the lure of just having like auto on mode for GTM?
Um, I personally think like the idea of auto mode right now is like not real. Like you can get really close to auto mode, but like there's no preventing you from having to sit down and either push a button or review something. And it depends on quality, right? Chinese marketing agencies that can produce like millions and millions of TikTok videos and Instagram videos, and they're doing that autonomously. But the quality is really low, right? So, but if a serious B2B founder building a $15 million business or $20 million business off of a Series Seed or A, like you do want to review these things before they go out. They are not good enough that they're going to pass the sniff test. And you also have to remember that like everybody's trying to use AI at the same time, and it's all based on the same collection of human language. So it's always going to be predictable. You either have to put time up front to like build skills and build things in engineering land to basically make it better. I haven't found any founders yet that are like fully running auto mode on any kind of campaign that gets created. I do see a lot of automation though around campaign review, campaign editing, campaign improvement. And so the thing to think about too is like this is a lot easier for bigger companies with an existing framework or an existing process that exists for many people.
Yep. One more question from the audience. As the founding sales member responsible for outbound and ops and everything related to sales, how should I build my infra from scratch? And I know we talked a little bit about that, but do you have any kind of concrete suggestions in terms of the tools, workflows that they use for sales?
Less is more, baby. Less is more. I mean, I had a good friend, Brendan Kaczynski, who's the founder of Volca, and he was previously like the chief of staff and kind of go-to-market architect for this CX company called Thena. And this is like right at the start of AI. He was building a sick stack, like 20 different tools, all doing different things. But there was only like one or two sellers, and one of them was the founder. And so there was a lot of attention, energy, and time spent into building this massive system that was supposed to be providing value. But at the end of the day, like you have a very simple job as the first seller of an organization, whether you're a founder or not. You are supposed to like get more leads and close those leads. So anything that you're doing that's not doing one of those two things is frankly a waste of time. So if you need a tool to launch a campaign, go pick up the tool, set it up, launch the campaign, and do the job first. Don't think as much about building this massive piece of machinery. Focus on doing the job as simply as possible, as fast as possible. Over time, you'll start to have these pieces of infrastructure that are starting to collide. Then go figure out how to merge them all. Then go figure out tools you need and don't need. But solve the problem first. One of my kind of mantras I like to tell people is like tools are just meant to solve problems. So if you're building a stack and you're building infrastructure from scratch, I would start with like, what are the two or three things you have to do in order to be successful in your job? And like build the most minimum viable product you can using whatever comes to you. And again, if you need suggestions, like AI can be helpful. It can like give you tools for these things. But like try not to connect a grand stack. Try to just like do things maybe a little bit more messy at first to get off the ground.
Yep. That's great advice. For founders like really trying to utilize AI and like maybe they feel like they're behind, like specific to like GTM workflows, what are 3 workflows slash AI use cases that you would tell them to implement right away?
Well, I told you one of them. So everybody should have a meeting follow-up bot. Like everybody should have this. If you're wasting time drafting emails at the end of the day, I think you are nuts. That's number one. And then maybe I'll provide one for go-to-market and one for marketing just to round things out. Because we talk a little bit of sales. There's also marketing. So on the marketing front, I really think that everybody wants to use AI to create more content, but they haven't really figured out how. And I think like sitting down and documenting physically the process that you want to go through is really important because there's many ways to do this. And I often found that in the beginning when I started writing, I just hadn't written down the process that I wanted to follow. So I was writing notes in Sublime. I was writing notes in my Notes Apple app. I had stuff in email and then I had stuff on Substack. And I just like hadn't figured out the human process for like how I should actually write. So first, just figure out something dead simple, super simple. Like I actually suggest people just like write with Apple Notes, for example, because Claude and Codex can connect to Apple Notes and pull your data in. Could be Notion as well. Doesn't really matter. And once you figured it out, I would actually suggest that everybody on marketing who cares about content to try to develop a tone guide and a humanizer. Talked about this. It's just a list of all the rules that it gives it, but it's a structure for you to continually give feedback to AI on the things that you like and don't like about its writing, and it's a skill. Second thing is the tone guide, which is attached to the skill. People should think about tone guides for different surface areas. A tone guide for Slack, a tone guide for text, a tone guide for email, tone guide for LinkedIn, a tone guide for long writing, and all those tones are different. And you should allow it to go crawl your instances of, email and iMessage, whatever, to come up with that tone guide. You don't actually have to do it yourself. So that's my second use case for marketing. First use case was for founders. Build yourself an email prep tool or an email follow-up tool. And then the third one for sellers is I actually think an automation to complete the outcome of every meeting is it's kind of the other part of the follow-up email for sales specifically. And so through the process and literally write out in detail, after every call, I go into Salesforce, I do X, Y, and Z. I then go to the contact record, I do X, Y, and Z. I go onto LinkedIn and I do X, Y, and Z. I follow up, I do X, Y, and Z. Add this to it, do X, Y, and Z. I send the Slack message to X, Y, and Z. Write out all the steps that the best version of you would do in a given day. Ask it to do it 5 to 10 times, make it a skill, promote it to a cron. And they're in doing that process, you'll find the tools that you need. We talked before about like, hey, what's the infrastructure I need? Well, if you're that first time founder, as you're writing out the best version of you that does all these follow-ups, you'd be like, actually, I need a LinkedIn tool. I need a tool like HeyReach to go send the LinkedIn message to the person afterwards to connect with them, to grow my network. So you'll naturally find the tools that you need by documenting the best version of you. Everybody's looking for shortcuts. So try to spend some time being thoughtful about like, what is the actual best processes you as a seller, as a great seller would follow, and then continually improve it. Because once you have that framework in place, you'll actually be able to find on LinkedIn and Substack and Reddit the cool practices that people are doing, and you'll be able to incorporate it. You'll have this automation you're running, like, hey, I saw that Scott or John was doing X, and I just want you to incorporate that. You give them the LinkedIn URL, they'll go read it, they'll try to add it to your profile.
Yep. Great advice. Awesome. Well, that looks like a good place to wrap up. Austin, thank you very much for joining and sharing your take on how founders should use AI. Really cool to see like what you've been seeing. And thanks everyone else in the audience for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and have a few ideas to take back to your own GTM systems. So thanks again, Austin, and everyone have a great day.